Tisha B'Av that we commemorate the destruction of both the first and the second temples in Jerusalem, as well as a lot of other tragedies that either happened on the 9th of Av, today's date, or tonight's date, and or are attributed to or associated with those days, including the expulsion of the Jews from Spain in 1492. Did you know that that happened on Tisha B'Av? In particular, also the Jews of England were expelled in 1290, I think, from England, and lots of other tragedies that happened to the Jewish people. And so we observe it with a day of fasting. So I thought I would share a couple of rabbinic texts, because did you know that it's forbidden to study Torah on Tisha B'Av?
No, I didn't know that.
You don't mean Shabbat. You mean on Shabbat or
on
on
Shabbat?
Tisha?
On Shabbat, it's very good to study Torah. On Tisha B'Av,
On Tisha B'Av,
it's actually forbidden.
Because it gives joy, right?
Right.
Yeah, because studying Torah brings us joy. So I'll share with you a Mishnah right here. This is from the Mishnah, from the tractate Ta'anit, which deals with all of the fast days. And it says, there were 5 events that happened to our ancestors on the 17th of Tammuz and 5 on the 9th of Av. On the 9th of Av, it was decreed that our ancestors should not enter the land. The temple was destroyed the first and the second time. Beitar, which was a great fortress in Judea, was captured, and the city was plowed up. And when Av enters, they limit their rejoicing, right? Mishenichnas Av, mimatin b'simcha, and it's the opposite of the saying that we always say, Mishenichnas Adar. When we go into the month of Adar, when Purim time, we have to increase our happiness. And the opposite, in this case, when the month of Av comes in, we decrease our simcha, we decrease our happiness. And how do we do that? Oops. How do we do that? The Mishnah or the Gemara Ta'anit explains. The sages taught, all mitzvot practiced by a mourner are likewise practiced on the 9th of Av. So it's prohibited to engage in eating and drinking, as we know, and in smearing oil on one's body, and wearing shoes, we say leather shoes, and conjugal relations. It's prohibited to read from the Torah, from the prophets, and from the writings, and to study from the Mishnah and the Gemara and the Midrash, and collections from Halachot, and collections of Agadot. What's left, right? We're not allowed to study Torah on Tisha B'Av. We're not allowed to eat and to drink, right? What are we allowed to do on Tisha B'Av? However, one may read from a place in the Bible that he is unaccustomed to reading, as it'll be difficult for him and he won't get much pleasure from it. And he may also study from a place in the Talmud that he is unaccustomed to studying for the same reason. And one may read from the book of Lamentations, of Echa, which we'll read tonight at 8:15, and from the book of Eov, of the book of Job, which is a tragic story, and from the evil matters in Jeremiah. And school children interrupt their studies for this day because it's stated, the precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing in the heart. In other words, we're not supposed to rejoice in the Torah today or rejoice at all. And Rabbi Yehuda says, one may not even read from a place in the Bible that he is unaccustomed to reading, nor may he study from a place in the Talmud that he's unaccustomed to studying. However, he may read from Job and from Lamentations and evil matters of Jeremiah. So there's a machloket, there's a dispute, right? Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you can't even read from a part of the Torah that you're unaccustomed. I don't buy that argument that just because I'm unfamiliar with it is going to give me less pleasure to study it. Rather, we should stick to topics that are sad, so to speak. Okay? Does that surprise you? Questions, thoughts, right? What, did you know all these things about Tisha B'Av? So the book of Echa, which we'll read tonight, right, is said to be written by Jeremiah, lamenting the destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem. So it's a very sad story. And one time I had the occasion to sit in Jerusalem on the rubble of the western wall, the south part, by the rubble, and read Eicha together with the group. And it was unbelievable to see that site and to be reading Eicha right there where it was probably written, or not far from where it was written originally by Jeremiah. And this practice of reading the book of Eicha, of decreasing our happiness and refraining from studying Torah and other things that make us joyful, connect us with that part of our history, right? In fact, I read that there was a British lawmaker who was walking by a synagogue once and heard the people crying and wailing on Tisha B'Av and saying keynote and Eicha and sitting on the floor. And he walked by and he said something like, people that have been, that are still crying over the destruction of their temple that took place so long ago are destined for greatness. In other words, that sadness connects us to our past, to our history, our collective history. So why were the first and the second temple destroyed? Have we heard? Do we have ideas? How could God have allowed for the temple? This was the center of Judaism, right? Remember, we've been dealing up until now with prayer and saying that prayer, while we know that it existed in the temple times, that people still prayed, the organized prayer of Shachri, Mincha, Marav, that all Jews do, all the time now, is a construct of the rabbis to keep Jews engaged, because they lost their central place of worship, the central address for Judaism, which was the temple in Jerusalem. So how could it be that God allowed the temples to be destroyed? Have you had thoughts? Have you heard anything, studied before?
Yeah, I studied before, and it's not in what you're showing. I studied, and I don't remember, I think it was why the second temple was destroyed. It was because of machlokas between Jews. There was a simcha, and there was some confusion about who should be invited, and a party was slighted.
Okay, so you're getting to a story,
yes.
But the answer, which you said, one of the answers, which we'll get to, you're giving, was that people just generally weren't nice to each other.
Right.
Yeah.
They generally didn't get along. They didn't treat each other with decency and respect. And that was one answer given by the rabbis. And the rabbis discussed this, and they said, how could it be that the temple was destroyed? And they say in Masechet Yomah, in the Gemara, dealing with mostly Yom Kippur.
There it is. Second.
Due to what reason was the first temple destroyed? The first temple was destroyed due to the fact that there were three matters that existed in the first temple: idol worship, forbidden sexual relations, and bloodshed. Right? Can you imagine in the temple, in the first temple, that it was so corrupt that there were things going on like murder, right, and rape or whatever, and idolatry, right, even, right, in the temple?
Yeah, they were Hellenized, yeah.
It was the Maccabees. We think of them, the family of the Maccabees, not the Maccabees that fought, but their descendants.
Right. We're becoming assimilated, Hellenized, or whatever.
Yes.
And we even found when we were touring Jerusalem, when we went a couple of times with our groups, we found evidence of idol worship, right? Idols that were kept in the homes of Jews right there near the temple in Jerusalem. Unbelievable things for Jews who were living so close to the temple. It was taking place in the temple. This idolatry, this murder, right? All kinds of terrible things, right, in the holiest place.
Good for you, John.
However, we continue, considering that the people during the second temple were engaged in Torah study, observance of mitzvot, and acts of kindness, that they did not perform the sinful acts that were performed in the first temple, then why was the second temple destroyed? If all of these corrupt things were going on in the time of the first temple, that certainly wasn't happening in the time of the second temple. So why was the second temple destroyed? And the answer given by the Gemara, it was destroyed due to the fact that there was wanton hatred during that period. This comes to teach you that the sin of wanton hatred is equivalent to the 3 severe transgressions: idol worship, forbidden sexual relations, and bloodshed. In other words, treating each other badly, right? Treating each other with disrespect and just general hatred, called here sinat chinam, baseless hatred, just free-flowing hatred. That is equivalent or worse than all 3 idol worships, forbidden sexual relations, and bloodshed happening even in the temple itself, right? Jews all over the place were treating each other poorly, and other people maybe even poorly. Sinat chinam, right? Chinam means free, right? Sinah means hate, like free hatred, like just abounding, just negative moods. That was rampant in the Jewish community. And for that, says the Talmud, we suffered the destruction of the Second Temple. So the Talmud tells a story about this, right? What does it mean, this sinat chinam, right? And this is the party that Bill was referring to. This is a party that is described in the tractate of Gittin, having to do with when people get married and then they separate, right? You need to have a get, right? That's a Jewish divorce. And there's a whole tractate dealing with the idea of Jewish divorce and also other things. And this story is related in that parsha, or in that tractate. And it's about 2 people, a guy named Kamsa and a guy named Bar Kamsa. They're 2 different guys. They have similar names, right? Here we have Steve and Susan, and I am Steve and Susan, right?
Cool.
It's easy to get us confused, right? People have similar names, and these guys, Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, had similar names. They got confused. So the story is about these 2 guys. And we'll read together. The Gemara explains that Jerusalem was destroyed on account of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. This is as there was a certain man whose friend was named Kamsa, and his enemy was named Bar Kamsa. Once, he, Kamsa, made a large feast and said to his servant, "Bring me my friend Kamsa." The servant went mistakenly and brought his enemy Bar Kamsa instead. Made a mistake. Instead of inviting Kamsa, his friend, he invited his enemy Bar Kamsa. And the host said to him when he showed up for the party, when Bar Kamsa showed up for the party, he said, "No, you must leave." And Bar Kamsa said to him, "I will give you money for half the feast. Just don't send me away." He was embarrassed. And the host said to him, "No, you must leave." And Bar Kamsa said to him, "I will give you money for the entire feast. I'll pay for the whole thing. Just please let me stay."
Said
And
sold.
the host said to him, "He is sold," says Joyce. No, he still wouldn't do it. And that's how much he hated this man. He said, "No, you must leave." And finally, the host took Kamsa by his hand, stood him up, and took him out. And after having been cast out from the feast, Bar Kamsa said to himself, "Since the sages were sitting there and did not protest the actions of the host, although they saw how he humiliated me, we learned from there that they were content with what he did." So we'll stop there for a second. How do you feel about this story? Right? Guy wanted to invite Kamsa. His servant accidentally invites Bar Kamsa. Bar Kamsa shows up. He says, "You get out of here." He says, "I'll pay for the meal. Please don't send me away. I'll pay for all of it." "Nope. Get out." And he leaves.
He not only left, he forced them out.
He picked him up and threw him out. And guess
Threw
what?
him out physically.
All of the rabbis who were invited to the party were sitting there at the table, and they watched this whole thing happen, and nobody said anything.
Yeah.
The thing, it certainly doesn't seem correct or good behavior. But I would also say to you, when you say the reason it was destroyed was because of this transaction. I mean, I walk down the street and I pray to God to myself, please don't let it rain on me. So is it to say that because of me, I'm requesting it not to rain? That's why it doesn't rain? I mean, that's what this story seems a little bit too.
No, no,
No? Why?
no, no. This is human behavior. Jack, you're talking about with Hashem. This is between people.
Yes, this is that the lights of Judaism that were sitting there in the party, the rabbis that everybody thought put on a big high pedestal, they saw bad behavior and they didn't say anything.
But
And
my understanding is the reason that Jerusalem was destroyed is because God wasn't with them anymore. So I don't know how that isn't like.
Well, we just read. If
But
you
what
recall,
was the reason that he disliked Bar Kamsa? Was there?
It didn't matter.
What-
It doesn't matter.
they had history, right? It says they hated each other. They were enemies.
But could it have been that he did something extremely cruel?
Yes.
You know, he may have raped his wife or killed a child, or we
100%.
don't know what prompted that.
100% yes, right? We don't know anything about these two guys except that they hated each other. And they probably had good reasons for hating each other. In fact, if I was Bar Kamsa, I wouldn't like this guy very much either right now.
So why did he even come to the party?
He came to the party because he was invited.
by mistake.
Well, he didn't know it was a mistake.
Rabbi, I smell a
Such
metaphor
enemies, I wouldn't
coming.
think you would go.
No, the servant made the mistake, Shirley.
Yeah, but if you're invited to a party by your enemy, I'm surprised he even went.
Yeah.
He
Oh, we
didn't
know.
know.
Wait a minute.
Thought the
We know
invitation was valid.
why Romeo went to Juliet's house.
Peace offering.
Maybe Bar Kamsa went to a party of his enemy Kamsa because he hoped to meet other people there that he's not enemies with.
Who
Just
knows, right?
like-
Maybe that's why, or maybe because he wanted to make amends, or maybe because he wanted to
To
cause a
reconcile.
scene maybe he wanted to cause a scene at the party and ruin everything. You know, who knows what he wanted to do, right? But he showed up and he was clearly like he didn't want to go, and he wasn't trying to cause a scene. At least it seems from the story that we.
There were a lot of good answers to that question. Thank you.
But what he did when you read further on, the
so
Bar
what did Kamsa do? So Bar
Kamsa person makes it so that really he was an evil person.
Yeah. So what did Bar Kamsa do? Bar Kamsa is not blameless, right? Bar Kamsa says, wait a second, all of these rabbis were sitting around the table and they watched this whole thing happen. That means they must agree with what's going on, right? This is terrible, and I'm going to take them all down. And he said, I will therefore go and inform against them to the king. And he went and he said to the emperor, the Jews have rebelled against you. And the emperor said to him, who says that this is the case? And Bar Kamsa says, go and test them. Send them an offering that will be brought in honor of the government and see whether they'll sacrifice it. And so the emperor went and sent with him a choice 3-year-old calf. And while Bar Kamsa was coming with the calf to the temple, he made a blemish on the calf's upper lip.
Oh.
And some say he made a blemish on its eyelids, a place where, according to us, that is according to halakha, it's a blemish. But according to them, according to the Gentiles, it is not a blemish, right? It was a little scratch on the ear or on the mouth or whatever it was, right? Or the eyelid or whatever it was that renders this animal not fit for sacrifice in the temple, but that the Romans consider it not blemished. So Kamsa brought the animal to the temple, and the priests would not sacrifice it on the altar because it was blemished. But they also couldn't explain this satisfactorily to the Gentile authorities who didn't consider it to be blemished. So the blemish notwithstanding, the sages thought to sacrifice the animal as an offering due to the imperative to maintain peace with the government. They said, okay, well, we're not supposed to sacrifice it, but well, let's do it anyway, because otherwise we're going to get in trouble with the government. Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkolas said, if the priests do that, then they will say that blemished animals may be sacrificed at the altar. And the sages say, if we don't sacrifice it, then we must prevent Bar Kamsa from reporting this back to the emperor. The sages thought that they should kill him, kill Bar Kamsa, so that he wouldn't go back and speak against them. Rabbi Zechariah said to them, if you kill him, the people will say that someone who makes a blemish on a sacrificial animal has to be killed. So as a result, they did nothing. Bar Kamsa's slander was accepted by the authorities, and consequently the war between the Jews and the Romans began. And Rabbi Yochanan says, the excessive humility of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkolas destroyed our temple, burned our sanctuary, and exiled us from the land. So what do you think about this story?
Wow.
Who's the bad guy?
Sounds like Portland.
No politics.
It's not politics.
That's
It's a life
shut up.
lesson. It's a life's lesson.
Stop it. Stop.
But it
Well,
honestly ended up, I don't know if it's
Um,
like Portland, but it ended up so that the rabble, the awful Jewish little group of people took over the
You're
temple
breaking up.
and was and they even though this started to happen when there was a festival, the people were stuck there. The people that were fighting, that wanted to fight the Romans, they didn't even let the people out of Jerusalem that had come for the festival. If you read the history, it's just awful.
Mm-hmm. What about in this story? Whose behavior was the worst here?
The Bar Kokhba person, because Kamsa, because he, and Kokhba too, but the Bar Kamsa, because of him, he started a war.
Yeah, but can you imagine this discussion that was going on among the rabbis? Right?
Yeah.
Should we sacrifice a blemished animal? Should we kill this guy? Well, if we killed him,
Whoa.
well, we could kill him. Well, nobody said, oh, we can't kill him. That would be an unjust killing. They said, no, we can't kill him, because then people will think that if you blemish an animal that's going to be sacrificed, then you have to be killed. Right? So
But
here's the rabbis
they
having this
didn't know whether
unbelievable discussion. There's Kamsa behaving irresponsibly. There's Bar Kamsa being a jerk. Right? Everybody is treating each other badly. Yep.
and the rabbis made the assumption that the emperor had sent a blemished animal instead of investigating whether he had sent a clean animal, and Bar Kamsa, which indeed he did,
Mutilated.
caused the blemish. And then the rabbis were also wrong that in their status, why didn't they go to the emperor and make the explanation? Maybe you didn't know that this animal was blemished. Would you give us another one? And we would like to sacrifice it on your behalf.
Yeah, but Bar Kamsa was the only one in the story who actually did a malicious act. Everybody else, it was their thoughts or their assumptions. He physically did something, what I would consider like a criminal act.
Yeah, but Natalie, if the rabbis sat there while Kamsa said, "You can't be here, get out of my house," and didn't go up.
So he should have, honestly, got thrown out. He should have kept his anger for the rabbis too, for that guy whose party it was, and not done something to endanger the whole of Israel, which is what he did.
Yes, but I think the story, I think there's plenty of blame to go around here, right?
That's
Everybody in
what
this
I was
story,
gonna say.
everybody in this story is wrong. But let's look at the host of the party, right? The host of the party hates this guy. It's his enemy, right? He kicked him out. He has a right to kick him out. It's his house, right? At the same time, what would have happened if he had let him stay?
We don't know.
I don't know, right? Anyway, if
It
any
could
one
be
of these,
said,
if any one of
I
these
think
people,
it could be said that Kamsa was malicious, when he sent the invitation, knowing he was going to say no, he was making an example.
No. It was a
No,
mistake.
it was a mistake.
It was a mistake.
Yeah,
It was
well,
a
at least,
mistake.
Well,
according to the text, it was a
I'm
mistake.
saying maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe a guy whose name is Kamsa, who hates a guy named Bar Kamsa, knows well enough how the servant could have become confused and would have been clearer in his instructions.
That's too
That's
much of a
interesting.
stretch.
Well, nobody
I thought
says
you were
that.
going to say that maybe the servant wanted to try to mend the relationship and invited Bar Kamsa to the party. You know,
But that's a possibility too. I said at the beginning, I think there's a metaphor here.
Yeah.
yes.
We lost it.
Well, my little,
Rose.
I'm still,
You froze, Steve. Okay, so we see that everybody's wrong. So the Mishnah describes. Remember, the Mishnah, the Gemara is expounding, commenting on the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that the temples were destroyed. The first temple was destroyed because there was idol worship. There was all kinds of terrible sexual acts going on. There was murder and bloodshed happening even on the temple property. And for that reason, the first temple was destroyed. And the second temple, the rabbis say, well, that wasn't happening in the second temple. Why in the second temple? And they say, no, the second temple, it was just as bad as all of those things happening, were that people were treating each other like this. People were treating each other terribly, right? And here's an example of the story, right? I don't know if the rabbis actually believe that the temple was actually destroyed because of these two people, or is an example of how, you know, generally, people having destructive interactions can impact the entire community, right? And so the opposite of this, right? So on Tisha B'Av, we teach the opposite of this. Can you imagine the opposite of sinat chinam, the opposite of baseless hatred, right? We don't even have a term like that. Ahavat chinam, right? Free love. I guess that was the 60s we said that, right? Right.
You weren't around.
I wasn't around, but it sounded like a groovy time. And right, but lahavdil, right? The opposite of sinat chinam would be ahavat chinam, right? Generally giving people the benefit of the doubt, generally being nice and kind and polite, no matter how we really feel about someone or whatever, what they did or whatever. But for the sake of shalom bayit, for the sake of peace in the house, that we're always trying to rodef shalom and ohev shalom. We're just like Aaron, we're supposed to chase peace, we're supposed to pursue peace, we're supposed to make peace and not make division. Because when we have that kind of animosity, it creates division, not just among individuals, but ultimately among, you know, the entire community, and results, as we see in the destruction of the temple, God forbid. So I think we learn a couple of things, right? One is that that we should make every effort in our personal lives, in our political activism, right, in all of the things that we do to try to build shalom, to try to build peace, and not tear apart and create divisions and express hatred and negativity unnecessarily, because that love, that acceptance is what will bring us together and keep us from falling apart. And the second thing that we learn is anytime you have a party, you have to invite Steve, Susan, and Steve and Susan to avoid any one of these types of problems. Any other thoughts, questions?
And I promise we'll all behave nicely.
And if I want Jack Katz, do I have to also invite all of his kittens? So there.
You're in luck. I have